I came home with her favorite dinner and left with the truth. The Thai place on Glenwood Avenue knew Vanessa's order by heart. Chicken pad Thai, mild, extra lime, no peanuts, because she liked saying she was adventurous but never ordered anything that might surprise her. I had picked it up after leaving the construction office in Charlotte earlier than planned, thinking I would walk in, set the bag on the counter, and maybe salvage a quiet Friday night with the woman I had spent 7 years trying to keep happy. The drive back to Raleigh had taken 2.5 hours through rain, brake lights, and the kind of highway silence that makes a man believe home is still waiting for him. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the porch light was on, the upstairs window was dark, and the house looked exactly like the life I thought I had built. White siding, trimmed hedges, 2 rocking chairs Vanessa had ordered online and never sat in, and the brass house number I had installed myself after she said the old one looked cheap. I carried the takeout bag in one hand and my overnight duffel in the other, careful not to let the paper handles tear from the steam. The front door was unlocked. That was the first small thing. Vanessa always locked it when I traveled. I stepped inside, quiet at first, expecting to hear the television or music from the kitchen. Instead, the house was dim. The hallway lamp cast a narrow yellow line across the hardwood, and from behind the half-closed office door came Vanessa's voice, low and bright in a way she had not used with me in a long time. I stopped before I meant to. My thumb tightened around the takeout bag. She laughed softly, then said, "No, you do not understand. Caleb is safe. He is stable. He is just a substitute. Once Mark is back for good, I will dump him." The words moved under the door like smoke and filled the hallway before I could breathe. For a second, my mind did something merciful. It refused to translate. Substitute. Dump him. Mark. Each word sat separate, harmless by itself, until they lined up and became a sentence sharp enough to cut 7 years in half. I did not open the door. I did not say her name. I did not throw the food on the floor or demand she explain what could not be explained. I stood there with warm noodles in my hand, while something in my chest went cold. Through the narrow crack in the office door, I could see the corner of her desk, the glow of her laptop, and one bare foot tucked under her chair. She sounded comfortable. That was the part that changed me. Not guilty, not nervous, comfortable. Like I was not a husband in the next room or a man who had paid the mortgage, fixed the water heater, sat beside her mother through 3 hospital appointments, and helped keep her boutique alive when the first year nearly buried it. I was a holding pattern, a spare key, a warm house until the man from her past decided whether he wanted the future she had saved for him. She kept talking, but my ears had already taken in enough. I placed the takeout bag on the entry table beside the bowl where we kept loose change and mail keys. The bottom of the bag left a damp ring on the wood. I stared at it for a moment, absurdly focused on how Vanessa would complain if it stained. Then I picked it up again and carried it to the kitchen, setting it carefully on the counter because habit is a strange thing. Even when your life is cracking, some part of you still tries not to make a mess. I walked out through the back door onto the porch. The rain had stopped, leaving the deck boards dark and shining under the yard light. The air smelled like wet grass and pine mulch. I sat in the chair I had repaired twice, pulled out my phone, and called Logan Brooks. He answered on the 3rd ring, voice rough with sleep or television. "Caleb? Everything all right?" I looked back through the kitchen window. From this angle, the house looked warm, peaceful, alive with curtains. "I need a place to think," I said. Logan did not ask for details. That is why he was my friend. "Come over," he said. "Door is open." I ended the call and sat there for another minute, listening to the quiet yard and the muffled sound of Vanessa still talking inside. My wedding ring felt heavy on my finger, not like a promise anymore, more like a badge for a job I had never actually been hired to keep. When I finally stood, I did not go back through the office. I did not correct her. I did not warn her. I let the sentence finish what it came to destroy. That night, I stopped being her safety net. By morning, the man she called temporary would begin making permanent decisions. Logan lived 20 minutes away in a brick ranch house on the edge of Cary, the kind of place with an old basketball hoop over the garage and a porch light that always seemed to be on for somebody. I drove there with no radio, no phone calls, and no clear thought except the sound of Vanessa's voice repeating in my head. Safe. Stable. Substitute. The words sat in the passenger seat like unwanted company. By the time I pulled into Logan's driveway, The takeout bag was still on my kitchen counter, cooling beside a marriage that had just shown me its real temperature. Logan opened the door before I knocked. He wore sweatpants, a faded Duke sweatshirt, and the expression of a man who knew better than to greet pain with jokes. "Guest room is made," he said. That was all. Good friends do not always need the story first. Sometimes they just make space for the version of you that cannot stand upright yet. I walked in, set my duffel by the couch, and sat at his kitchen table while he poured coffee neither of us needed. His house smelled like cedar, black coffee, and the lemon cleaner his wife used on the counters. It was ordinary in a way that almost hurt. Ordinary had been what I thought I was driving home to. Logan sat across from me and waited. I stared at the steam rising from the mug. "She is waiting for Mark," I said. He did not flinch, but his jaw tightened. "Mark Whitman." I nodded. Everyone who knew Vanessa knew the name, even if they pretended not to. Mark was the old college boyfriend, the unfinished chapter, the story she had always wrapped in just enough nostalgia to make it sound harmless. He had left for New York years before I met her, chased some marketing job, some brighter life, some version of himself that apparently needed distance from her to exist. When Vanessa and I started dating, she told me Mark was history. I believed her because I wanted to believe that love could be chosen cleanly if a man showed up with both hands open. Logan leaned back. What did she say exactly? I repeated it once. Slowly. Saying it out loud made it worse and better at the same time. Worse because the words had a shape now. Better because they were no longer trapped alone in my chest. Logan looked toward the window, where rainwater clung to the glass in crooked lines. "What are you going to do?" I almost said I did not know, but that would have been a lie. Part of me had known the second I stepped onto the back porch. I was not going to beg for the role she had assigned me. I was not going to compete with a memory wearing another man's name. "I am going to get clear," I said, "before she gets creative." Logan understood immediately. His sister had gone through a divorce 2 years earlier, and he had watched one story become 3 depending on who told it first. "You need records," he said. "Money. Dates. Anything tied to the boutique. Anything tied to Mark. And you need a lawyer before Monday." I looked down at my ring. Under the kitchen light, it looked dull, scratched from years of job sites, repairs, and weekends spent fixing things Vanessa said made the house feel cheap. "Daniel Pierce," I said. "He handled my contract dispute last year." Logan nodded. "Call him tomorrow." I did not sleep much that night. The guest room was clean, with a navy quilt, a ceiling fan ticking softly, and a framed photo of Logan's kids at the beach. I lay on my back and watched the fan turn, counting each rotation like it might lead me to an answer. Around 2 in the morning, Vanessa texted, "Where did you go?" Then another, "You left dinner here." Then a third, 15 minutes later. "Are you being weird because I did not answer earlier?" I stared at the screen until it dimmed. She did not know. That was the strange power of the moment. She still thought she was managing a husband who would accept a half explanation if it came with a tired smile. I typed nothing. A man does not have to announce the moment he stops being available for disrespect. He just stops. At 6:15, I woke to gray morning light and the smell of Logan making toast downstairs. My phone had 4 missed calls from Vanessa and 1 voicemail I did not play. I opened my banking app instead. Mortgage payments, boutique transfers, vendor deposits, insurance premiums, the car note, the line of credit I had personally guaranteed when Vanessa's boutique almost folded its first winter. Numbers do not have feelings, but they remember what people try to forget. By 7, I had screenshots saved in a folder labeled personal records. By 7:30, I had emailed Daniel Pierce. By 8, I sat at Logan's kitchen table with black coffee, a legal pad, and a hand that had finally stopped shaking. Vanessa called again. I watched her name glow on the screen and let it fade. Logan stood by the stove, spatula in hand, and said nothing. He did not need to. The first permanent decision was not leaving the house. It was refusing to let Vanessa explain away a truth I had already heard clearly. Caleb sat in Logan's kitchen long after the first coffee cooled, staring at the legal pad and the folder labeled personal records. Each receipt, screenshot, and statement reminded him of years spent building stability for a woman who now called him a substitute. He thought about the boutique, the mortgage, the car note, the dinners he had cooked, the medical visits he had accompanied Vanessa through, and the countless small favors that had slowly become invisible to her. The weight of 7 years pressed against his chest. yet he felt clarity forming around it like the morning light through the blinds. Logan moved around the kitchen making breakfast, the scent of toast and brewed coffee grounding the space, and Caleb realized that ordinary life had been his undoing. Vanessa had depended on his presence so fully that she never questioned the emptiness behind her comfort. Memories of their wedding day surfaced, the small chapel with white lace curtains, the pride he felt as he promised lifelong devotion, the subtle joy of seeing her smile as they signed documents that would tie their finances and lives together. And now, that foundation had been called temporary, a mere placeholder for a man from her past who had not shown up yet. Caleb turned the pages of the folder, marking items that mattered most: dates, transfers, receipts, the boutique's expenses, messages hinting at Mark's involvement, anything that could substantiate the reality behind her words. He did not feel anger. He felt precision. Anger could cloud judgment, and he needed this moment to be exact, to ensure that no part of him could be misconstrued, no part of his patience mistaken for weakness. Logan brought the plate over, a simple breakfast of scrambled eggs and toast, setting it in front of him without comment. Caleb barely noticed, his mind reconstructing every instance of care and trust, each act that had gone unnoticed, each time he had protected her from failure and disappointment. The sunlight crept higher, slanting across the floor, illuminating dust motes floating lazily, and Caleb wrote notes to Daniel Pierce, detailing the situation without embellishment or emotion, just facts. Vanessa's calls came in again, ignored, flashing on the screen with increasing urgency. Caleb did not reply. A substitute responds, a man with agency decides. And he had agency. By late morning, he had a plan: to separate finances, protect his interests, consult the lawyer, and take the first steps toward exiting the role of temporary. Each action he recorded meticulously, ensuring that nothing could be altered or denied later. He looked out the window at the quiet street, thinking about how she would feel when confronted with a house suddenly neutral, controlled, and no longer a vessel for her fantasies. He imagined the moment she understood she had lost not a husband, but the safety she had relied upon without acknowledgement. The air in Logan's kitchen felt heavy with purpose. The weight of responsibility finally shifted, and Caleb felt a sense of liberation within the clarity of methodical planning, knowing that the moment he had been listening for had passed, and the decisions he now made would be his own. By noon, Daniel Pierce called back, and Caleb stepped onto Logan's back porch so the conversation could happen under open air instead of under another man's kitchen ceiling. The morning had warmed, turning the damp boards silver in the sun, and somewhere beyond the fence a lawn mower started with a rough cough. Caleb held the phone in one hand and the legal pad in the other, the pages filled with dates, transfers, notes, and the kind of plain facts that do not care how badly your heart hurts. Daniel did not waste time. "Tell me what you know, not what you feel," he said. Caleb almost smiled at that. It was exactly the sentence he needed. Feelings were everywhere. They were in the takeout bag cooling on the counter at home, in the damp ring on the entry table, in the word substitute still lodged behind his ribs. But facts were cleaner. Facts could stand in court, in mediation, in front of a woman who would likely call herself misunderstood the second consequences arrived. Caleb told him about the overheard phone call. He told him about Mark Whitman. He told him about Vanessa's boutique, the line of credit he had guaranteed, the personal funds he had used to keep the doors open, and the recent charges that did not match the explanations she had given. Daniel listened without interrupting. The only sound on the line was typing, steady and exact. When Caleb finished, Daniel said, "Do not confront her today. Do not empty accounts. Do not send emotional messages. We document. We separate what can legally be separated, and we make sure she cannot say you acted recklessly." Caleb looked across Logan's backyard, where two birds moved along the fence like they had all the time in the world. "I do not want to punish her," he said. "I just want out of the role she gave me." Daniel was quiet for half a second. "Then we will do this cleanly." Clean. The word landed like a board laid straight across broken ground. Daniel explained the first steps. Caleb could open a separate account for his paycheck. He could limit joint account use to household bills while the separation was pending. He could notify the boutique lender that he would not extend or renew any personal guarantees beyond existing obligations. He could gather records of discretionary spending without making accusations he could not prove. He could prepare a formal separation notice. No drama, no threats, no public embarrassment, just structure. When the call ended, Caleb stayed on the porch for a while, breathing in cut grass and wet wood. A part of him wanted the old, easy release of a fight. Walk through the front door, drop the truth on the floor, watch Vanessa scramble. But that was not strength. That was pain looking for an audience. He had already learned what happened when a marriage became a stage for someone else's unfinished fantasy. He would not make his exit another performance. By 1:30, he drove back toward Raleigh, not to beg, not to accuse, but to collect what he needed. The house looked quiet when he pulled up. Vanessa's car was gone. That told him enough. He parked in the driveway, walked inside, and found the takeout bag still on the counter, unopened, cold, and beginning to sag at the bottom. A small, ridiculous symbol of everything he had brought home to a woman who was already feeding a different story. He threw it away, wiped the counter, and went to the office. The room smelled like Vanessa's perfume and printer ink. On the desk, her laptop was closed, her coffee mug half full, and a sticky note with Mark's name beside a time and a Charlotte address. Caleb stared at it for a long moment. There it was. Not proof of every betrayal his mind could imagine, but proof enough that her world had a door he was never meant to see. He photographed the note, then set it exactly where it had been. That mattered. No tampering, no theatrics. He gathered copies of bank statements, business documents, insurance files, and the folder tied to the boutique loan. Each paper slid into his bag with a soft sound, like pieces of a life being removed from a frame. Upstairs, he packed 2 work shirts, a pair of jeans, his shaving kit, and the old watch his father had left him. He left the wedding photo on the dresser. Not out of cruelty, out of truth. That man in the picture had not heard what he had heard. By the time he stepped back into the hallway, his phone lit up. Vanessa. He watched it ring until it stopped. Then came a text. Are you home? He looked toward the office door, then toward the trash can where the dinner had disappeared. For 7 years, he had answered when called. That afternoon, he put the phone in his pocket and locked the front door behind him. A substitute waits to be replaced. Caleb was done waiting. Caleb spent the day organizing his life into tangible pieces, methodically separating finances, gathering documentation, and preparing every detail to ensure clarity in the unfolding situation. He drove to the bank first, opening a new account solely in his name, transferring necessary funds, and setting up automatic payments for household bills without touching Vanessa's accounts. Each transaction was deliberate, precise, a small act of reclaiming control from the chaos that had been imposed. Next, he visited the boutique, speaking with the manager quietly, explaining that he would no longer be the personal guarantor for any new purchases or loans, ensuring that Vanessa could continue her work without interference, but that he was drawing a line between responsibility and emotional attachment. As he returned to Logan's house, he organized the folder containing receipts, statements, and messages, labeling each with dates and notes, ready to share with Daniel Pierce without embellishment or unnecessary emotion. He spent hours reviewing the documents, making copies, and scanning the essential files into encrypted digital storage, taking care that nothing could be misrepresented or altered. By late afternoon, Caleb felt a mixture of exhaustion and relief. The clarity of action replaced the emotional turbulence of the morning. Logan brought lunch to the kitchen table, and for a brief moment, they shared a quiet meal, speaking only when necessary, aware that words might only disturb the careful structure Caleb had built. Afterward, Caleb called Daniel Pierce again, confirming the initial steps and setting up a plan for formal separation proceedings. Each step was measured, grounded, and calculated, allowing him to approach the next few days with a sense of control he had lacked for weeks. As evening approached, he packed essential personal items in a bag, leaving behind trivial belongings in the house, ensuring he had everything needed for temporary relocation and meetings with legal counsel. He walked through the empty house once more, checking that nothing important remained behind, acknowledging the years spent here with a quiet, sober recognition, and without anger or bitterness, understanding that the end of one role allowed for the beginning of another chapter in his life. Caleb left the house for the final time that day, closing the door gently, taking a deep breath of the crisp evening air, and knowing that the deliberate, careful steps he had taken were the first true acts of independence he had claimed in years, securing his future, protecting his rights, and ensuring that the story of his life could continue on his terms, with dignity, clarity, and purpose. The morning sunlight streamed through the blinds as Caleb reviewed the notes he had compiled the previous day, each line and date arranged meticulously to ensure accuracy and clarity. He sat at Logan's kitchen table, coffee steaming beside him, and methodically began organizing the evidence into three distinct categories: financial records, correspondence regarding the boutique, and communications that hinted at Vanessa's ongoing contact with Mark Whitman. Each document, carefully photographed and scanned, provided a framework he could rely on during legal discussions without relying on emotion or assumptions. As he worked, he considered the psychology of the situation, Vanessa's perception of him as a temporary fixture in her life, a substitute whose patience and reliability had been taken for granted. The clarity of thought that came from detachment allowed him to see patterns, such as repeated small favors, dinner preparations, and personal sacrifices that had been unnoticed and unappreciated, and he cataloged them without judgment, purely as factual instances. Around mid-morning, Logan returned from running errands, and without interruption, they shared breakfast, a quiet acknowledgement of support, knowing that words might disrupt the careful structure Caleb was constructing. Afterward, Caleb drafted messages to business associates, clarifying responsibilities and financial boundaries while leaving no space for misinterpretation, ensuring that the boutique could operate independently of his personal accounts, and that any personal guarantees he had extended were formally addressed. He also prepared a timeline of events, listing each interaction relevant to the unfolding situation, from bank transfers to communications and any other documentation that would support his position. By early afternoon, Caleb had compiled a comprehensive folder of digital and physical files, all labeled, indexed, and ready to present to Daniel Pierce, whose counsel would provide the necessary legal guidance. As he moved through the house, he packed personal items into a bag for temporary relocation, taking only essentials, leaving the remainder undisturbed, preserving evidence, and maintaining respect for the physical space. The act of organization brought a sense of control, a measured response to the turmoil of the past weeks, replacing anxiety with purpose. He paused to glance at the front window, noting the light playing across the hardwood floors, a silent reminder of the years spent maintaining a household, a partnership, and a life that had been based on trust. Each methodical step was an assertion of autonomy, a reclamation of agency that had been overshadowed by a relationship in which he had been cast as secondary. By late afternoon, Caleb had established a plan to move forward with legal procedures, financial separation, and personal clarity, ensuring that the next steps were deliberate, informed, and precise. The emotional detachment allowed him to recognize the gravity of the situation without letting anger or disappointment dictate his actions. The day concluded with Caleb sitting quietly on Logan's porch, the cool air and fading sunlight offering a calm backdrop to the structured and intentional steps he had taken, each decision reinforcing his independence, his understanding of boundaries, and his commitment to navigate the coming days with measured precision, dignity, and foresight. Caleb woke to a cool morning breeze filtering through Logan's open kitchen window, the scent of damp earth and cut grass mingling with the faint aroma of coffee still warm from the previous day. He sat at the table, reviewing his notes and the organized folder of evidence, each page carefully marked and cross-referenced, ensuring that nothing would be ambiguous or misconstrued. His mind traced the timeline of Vanessa's behavior, noting patterns, messages, and the subtle hints she had left behind, each detail a piece of the larger puzzle. By mid-morning, he made calls to the boutique's accountant, confirming that the financial separation he had initiated was being logged accurately and that any future transactions would be clearly delineated. The conversation was precise and formal, each sentence chosen to communicate facts without emotion, reinforcing the structure he was carefully constructing. Logan appeared briefly, dropping off a thermos of coffee, his presence a silent support, reminding Caleb that friendship could offer stability when the personal world seemed uncertain. Caleb returned to the kitchen table, assembling digital copies of contracts, receipts, and correspondence into an encrypted drive, labeling each file for ease of access and future reference. Each click of the keyboard was deliberate, a small assertion of control in a life recently unsettled. Around noon, he stepped outside into the backyard, the sun brightening the grass and casting long shadows from the fence. He allowed himself a moment of reflection, considering the years spent managing responsibilities for a woman who now saw him as temporary, as a placeholder. The contrast between past devotion and present necessity sharpened his focus, emphasizing the importance of measured, intentional actions over impulsive reactions. He returned inside, drafting a detailed email to Daniel Pierce, outlining every step he had taken, including financial separations, document collection, and timelines, ensuring that his counsel had a complete picture before any formal proceedings. Caleb paused only briefly to eat a simple lunch, his mind largely occupied with logistics and strategy, a meticulous preparation for the steps ahead. Late afternoon brought him to a quiet review of his personal items packed for temporary relocation, each choice intentional, leaving behind what was unnecessary while taking essentials for meetings and coordination with legal counsel. As evening approached, Caleb sat by the window, observing the fading light on the hardwood floors, recognizing the space he had shared for years while mentally marking the transition from a role of passive participation to active agency. The methodical progress, the attention to detail, and the deliberate separation of personal and shared responsibilities instilled a sense of calm and empowerment. By nightfall, he had mapped the next steps for legal consultations, ensured the boutique's operations would continue independently, and secured all evidence in a clear, accessible manner. He allowed himself a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility balanced by clarity, control, and the knowledge that each action was guided by purpose, precision, and foresight, solidifying his autonomy and preparing him to face the forthcoming days with confidence, steadiness, and unshakable determination. By the next evening, Vanessa learned what fantasy sounded like when it had to answer a real question. She met Mark Whitman at a rooftop bar in Charlotte, the same address Caleb had seen on the sticky note in her office, a place with glass railings, soft music, and a skyline view polished enough to make bad decisions feel expensive. She wore the green dress Caleb had bought her for their anniversary 2 years earlier, the one she once said made her feel confident, and Mark noticed it immediately. That was Mark's gift. He noticed surfaces, the dress, the earrings, the way the city lights caught in her hair. He knew how to make a woman feel like a memory worth returning to, but memories do not sign leases, pay bills, or stand beside you when the story stops being flattering. Vanessa sat across from him with her phone face down on the table, because Caleb had stopped answering and the silence was starting to scare her. "Something is wrong," she said. Mark lifted his drink, not quite meeting her eyes. "With Caleb, hearing my name from his mouth would have made me laugh if I had been there. Men like Mark love being mentioned in someone else's marriage until the marriage starts asking for consequences." Vanessa leaned closer. "He left. He has been staying somewhere else. I think he knows something." Mark's expression changed so quickly, she almost missed it. The charm did not disappear. It tightened. "Knows what exactly?" he asked. Vanessa blinked. "About us. About what we talked about." Mark looked toward the skyline, then down at the check folder the server had placed near his elbow. "Vanessa, we have not done anything that needs to become a whole situation." A whole situation. The phrase landed like cheap glass on tile. For months, Mark had fed her old promises in small pieces. He told her she was the one who got away. He said New York had changed him. He said he missed the way she understood him before life got complicated. But now that her actual life had become complicated, he was backing away from the table like the fire had started on her side only. "You said you came back for a reason," she whispered. Mark sighed, and that sigh told the truth before he did. "I came back to reset, to figure things out. I never said I was ready to take on a marriage ending." Vanessa stared at him. "Take on." He reached for his glass, but his hand stopped halfway. "You know what I mean." She did. That was the worst part. She understood perfectly. Caleb had been the house, the mortgage, the insurance, the boutique line of credit, the warm dinner on the counter, the man who fixed the broken hinge before she noticed it. Mark had been the rooftop, the old song, the flattering text, the beautiful possibility that never had to survive a Tuesday morning. Vanessa had mistaken a spotlight for a sunrise. She left the bar before dessert arrived. Mark did not follow her to the elevator. He texted 15 minutes later. Maybe we should slow down until things settle. She read it in the parking garage under fluorescent lights that made her green dress look tired. By the time she reached Raleigh, the house was dark except for the kitchen lamp. For 1 second, relief touched her chest because Caleb's truck was in the driveway. Then she stepped inside and saw the envelope on the kitchen table. Her name was written on it in Caleb's clean block letters. Not sweetheart. Not Vanessa honey. Just Vanessa Harrison. Beside it sat his house key, the spare remote for the garage, and a printed notice from Daniel Pierce. Her fingers trembled as she opened the envelope. Formal separation notice. Financial boundary summary. Boutique guarantee withdrawal timeline. Records of joint spending. Temporary address for communication through counsel. Page after page. Calm black ink on white paper. Every sentence too polite to argue with and too precise to dismiss. At the bottom was a smaller sheet, handwritten. You called me a substitute, so I am stepping out of the role. Vanessa lowered herself into the chair as if her knees had forgotten their job. The kitchen looked ordinary around her. The fruit bowl. The mail stack. The cabinet handle Caleb had tightened last month. The faucet he had fixed twice. The table he had assembled on a Sunday while she complained it took too long. Everywhere she looked, his presence remained, but his permission had been removed. Then her phone buzzed. Mark again. I need space. She stared at those 3 words until they blurred. Space was what men asked for when they wanted distance without guilt. Caleb had not asked for space. He had created an exit. Vanessa called him once. It went to voicemail. She called again. Nothing. The house made its small evening sounds around her. Pipes settling, refrigerator humming, wind pushing gently against the windows. For 7 years, those sounds had meant home because Caleb was inside them. Now they sounded like evidence. She sat at the table with the letter in her lap, the green dress wrinkling at her waist, and understood the first real lesson of her life. The man you treat like a placeholder may one day leave a space no fantasy can fill. Caleb returned to his routine with quiet determination, each step measured, from organizing his schedule to reviewing communications with precision and care, knowing that the next phase of his life demanded clarity and composure. He spent the morning reviewing documents, ensuring all financial separations and legal notices were correctly filed, the boutique records up to date, and his personal items carefully organized for temporary relocation. By midday, he called Daniel Pierce to confirm the next legal steps, verifying that everything aligned with the strategy they had outlined, leaving no room for misunderstanding or misinterpretation. The calm of the structured day contrasted sharply with the turbulence of the past weeks, but Caleb felt a growing sense of autonomy, knowing that his deliberate actions were reclaiming control over his own life. Later, he checked the house one last time, noting the details of his shared life with Vanessa, the cabinet handles he had tightened, the faucets he had repaired, the dinner table he had assembled, realizing that while these objects remained, his authority over his own presence within the home was complete. Evening brought a quiet reflection. Sitting on the porch as the sun set, Caleb acknowledged the necessity of detachment, appreciating the lessons in boundaries, respect, and self-reliance that had emerged from a complex and emotional situation. As the stars appeared, he considered the journey ahead and the independence he had asserted, understanding that the careful steps he had taken ensured not only legal and financial clarity, but also personal growth and empowerment. He paused and asked himself and the audience, what would you do if you found yourself in a position where patience and integrity were tested by someone you trusted, and could you make the hard decisions to reclaim your life while maintaining dignity? Think about the choices, the quiet courage, and the deliberate strategy that Caleb employed, and reflect on your own boundaries and values in relationships. If this story inspired you or offered insight into navigating complex family dynamics with thoughtfulness and respect, consider subscribing to the channel for more stories that illuminate human behavior, resilience, and the ways in which personal agency can reshape the course of a life, allowing you to witness more narratives where decisions, courage, and careful planning intersect to create meaningful outcomes. And join us to explore the profound lessons embedded in these family drama stories that reveal the strength of character and the subtle power of deliberate action.